Welcome back. I've got Renee Moorefield on the line. Renee, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I am awesome. Been looking forward to this conversation for a bit. So why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Oh, wow. I am the CEO of WisdomWorks, co-founded it with my husband 25 years ago. So this is our 25th anniversary this year. He is now retired, but I've continued leading the company. Our focus is on how to support leaders to really thrive in their lives and work and to create workplaces where all people can thrive. So it's been really wonderful work. We also certify other people to do our work or the kind of work that we do. We have about 250 what we call guides around the world that are really bringing a different kind of consciousness about and capability about how leaders lead so they can be more effective through the practices and principles of overall thriving.
It's amazing work and important work and over the quarter century. And congratulations to you and your husband and the entire team for reaching that milestone. It's a big deal. And I think you've probably seen all kinds of different things because I think back 25 years ago, how work was and how we worked. And, there's been some dramatic shifts and changes, and there's some things that are still the same. But even in the last 5 years has been absolutely um, chaotic, maybe might be a good word for it. But I
Yeah,
think
great word.
leaders, yeah, leaders, I find the ones that have been able to navigate through all of it have some commonalities, and I'm sure you've got some insights as well as to why certain leaders thrive and others struggle. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we have found that, especially through the last 5 years, I mean, COVID being such a dramatic, um, a significant experience for all of us and really affecting everyone in very different ways. The leaders that we have found that really have thrived through that experience have had sort of an inner knowing. They know who they are as people. They know their values. They know their sense of purpose in the world. They are interested in people and they have a deep care for people. And they want to create environments that really support people in moving through however they need to navigate these difficult experiences. They support them in doing that. They are people that are connectors. They really connect people with each other. And I guess the last thing I would say is they take care of their own well-being. So they're really clear about what they can say yes to, what they can say no to, and that alone is very difficult to do because often as someone in management or as someone who feels responsible for others, you feel like you want to take care of everything. But these are people who really know that they have to set some boundaries, that they can't support others in thriving if they're not also supporting themselves.
It's critical work to have boundaries and a saying, and it's not mine, but I use it quite a bit. No is a complete sentence. And it's difficult to say no, especially if you are, one of those leaders like you described, someone that really cares for people. I identify myself as a reformed people pleaser and would, I use this analogy to my, because I inherited it from my parents, and I'm sure they got it from their parents. But there was a conversation that I had with my late mother not too long ago, and I told her, I said, "Mom, you got to quit cutting off your feet to give people shoes."
Mm.
And sometimes we do that as leaders, is we sacrifice ourselves, and there's nothing wrong necessarily with doing that as a one-off or inconveniencing yourself to help somebody else. But when that becomes your norm, you're going to run out of gas really, really quick or have health issues or burnout. And, that's what a lot of the work that I do, just from my own personal burnout experience 15 years ago. I was the poster child for someone that was burned out. And after recovering from my year of worst case scenarios, as I like to refer to it, I decided, "Nah, I don't want to do that again." So, how do I still be true to myself as a leader and help people, but make sure that I am helping myself first and not in a selfish way per se, but kind of, because if I'm the best version of me, I'm going to be a much better leader for you or my team or anyone else. And I think that's something that a lot of leaders, unfortunately, don't take into consideration when they're developing their leadership skills.
I agree. It's one of the things, Michael, that I think we need to be flipping the script on. We did some research many, many, many years ago now, probably 20 something years ago, talking with futurists, talking with executives around the world at that time, and asking them, in the next 20, 30 years, what are the qualities and skills that will make for an effective leader? And what came out of that research then, that really struck me, is that we would stop seeing our health and well-being as something to pay attention to sometime in the future, that we would realize that that is a resource, that is an asset, that actually helps us become more effective. Now, this was 20 something years ago when we did this research. Today, I think we are realizing how important well-being, and when I say well-being, I'm not just talking about physical health or emotional health or mental health. I'm also talking about our spiritual well-being, our whole self, our whole lives. We are realizing that's important, but we haven't quite figured out, as we work with leaders, I can see that we haven't quite figured out around the world how to make our thriving part of our success, like truly an asset to our success, not just in our own lives, but in our companies. And companies are wrestling that down now. I mean, I think companies really are thinking about how creating environments where people can leave their work more capable, more well, more resourced, more rejuvenated than when they came to work, and how that can truly be a differentiator for the workplace. And that there are many generations now, from the older generation, but definitely the younger generations, who want that kind of workplace. So I think we're in the middle of flipping that script, that our well-being is something to be delayed to some indeterminate time in the future, and that it needs to be front and center now.
I agree. And, I had an interview with John Shepard not too long ago, and, we talked about the multiple generations and how we need to have everybody at the table, for lack of a better phrase, because one of the things that I notice in working with teams and with individuals is everyone, if they have great ideas and they feel comfortable sharing them and having that environment, it makes such a huge difference. And that ties into the spirituality of things. And, I'll give a personal story. And the other day I was going for my morning walk, and usually I've got my earbuds in and I'm listening to either an audio book or motivational YouTube video on something, or I'm learning about something new, because it's a great usage of my time to continue to learn. But as before I put my earbuds in, I was walking outside and I noticed the birds were chirping a little bit more than normal, or at least I just noticed it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to listen to nature and creation as my instruction today, and just notice sounds, the breeze. The skies were crystal clear blue, and it was just being present in the moment, and just being, quite frankly, awestruck on how everything is, how it's designed, from birds chirping, the design of their wings, to the wind and how that's working, to architectural design. How did those individuals come up with that structure? So it was like literally like, okay, I just got dropped onto this planet for the first time, and just was amazed at everything that I could see and hear and breathe and taste. And after that walk, which was a longer walk than I normally did because I was so immersed into it, it was just one of those really moving and spiritual moments for me. And it's something that I thought, you know what, I need to do that more often and just be present. And while it's important to learn and study new ways and things like that, there's times where you can learn by just taking in the information that creation is giving you. and it calms you down. And even I noticed my heart rate, because my smartwatch will keep track of my heart rate and steps and all that fun stuff. And I noticed that my heart rate, even though on my walks tends to be a little higher because I'm walking fast, it was actually almost at the level where it is when I'm sleeping, which is a very low resting rate. And I thought that is really interesting to notice. And I think that's something for leaders to really consider, is when you're focusing on your spirituality in your walk as a leader, um, being able to calm yourself, it goes a long, long way for you to get that clarity. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, you are hitting an aspect of sort of how we thrive as human beings, that the kind of the spiritual dimension that to me is they're all the dimensions are important, but the spiritual dimension is probably my love as far as my deeper study. My dissertation was actually on the subject, and the practice that you did was to go for a walk in nature and just really notice the birds chirping, feel the sun on your skin, notice the crackle of the rocks under your feet as you walk. Just that mindfulness practice without any judgment, and with complete compassion and a heightened awareness, really does tune you into the world around you, tunes you into sort of the mystery and the awe that we are swimming in all the time, that we can really lose sight of. And it does calm your nervous system. We need leaders, especially in our kind of sometimes crazy making, turbulent, constantly changing world. We need leaders who, I had a friend say this last week, we need leaders who don't wobble. So leaders who are balanced and are really self-regulated. And that's exactly what you're talking to. So that mindfulness walk that you did, that all walk that you did, helped you tune into tune in a way that really supported your sense of self-regulation internally. And that from that place is the place to that you can make the best decisions, that you can see things more discerningly, that you can have kind of clarity of mind, clarity of thought, and make clear actions. There are a number of paths for people. So when you look at just not around the world, but if you look just at the US, the latest Pew Research would say that 58% of Americans are really ally to some religion. They would call themselves religious. About 22% of people will say they're spiritual but not religious, and then the rest, another 22%, say that they're neither. So we have a nation who feels very connected to spirituality in some way. And when I think of spirituality, I think of religion. For many people, that is the primary path that really gives people a sense of community. It gives direction. It gives connection to sort of this greater mystery of things. But there are other paths for other people. So when you mentioned going outside for a walk in nature, so being out in, it's part of why I live in Colorado, because out my door, I can hike in the mountains, and you can be just away from things and just absorbing the beauty and the natural, the nature around you. So that's another path. Acts of service. So really service to others, as much as we don't, as you and I talked about at the first of this conversation, as much as we don't want to give so much of our energy away that there is none left for our own capacity to thrive. Acts of service, even the smallest kind acts. So you're in a grocery store and you pay for the jelly that someone behind you has, or you pay for a coffee for someone, or you just say someone, wow, that shirt, it looks really gorgeous on you. Just small things and large things are also a very strong path, a great path of spirituality for people. So yes, I'm agreeing with you that spirituality is so important. And what I think it does for all of us in roles of management and leadership is it helps us with not only that sense of self-regulation that you and I talked about, but it also helps us with perspective taking. So we need a more open-mindedness, open-heartedness, and broad-mindedness, the ability to take in many perspectives that differ from our own. And I know from our research, because we have a multifactorial assessment system that looks at all these dimensions of thriving. I know from our research that when someone shows up as spiritually centered, meaning however they define spirituality, it's a core part of who they are and therefore a core part of their leadership. They show up more tolerant and more seeking of diversity, the diversity of points of views around them. And that's good for the problems that we're facing, most of which are incredibly complex and don't have one right solution. We need to draw from many perspectives that differ than our own to come up with some solutions. So perspective taking is a big one. And the other thing that I would say spirituality does is it really mitigates burnout. So, and I know from understanding more about your work, Michael, that's a core part of it. This understanding burnout, what happens in burnout, and how do we prevent it? So our spiritual lives can really support us in in preventing acting in ways that then cause burnout for us or being in toxic situations. It helps us to, like you said before, say no, and it helps us to know when to say yes to things. So those are just a few things that I think are important when it comes to spirituality. Among many, by the way, there are so many ways that our spirituality really supports our overall thriving.
I'm a big fan of it. And I think what it helps, and you touched on a lot of points where when you're facing challenging situations, be the calm in the storm. And that doesn't mean that you are, you know, lazy or you don't care, you're not passionate about things. You just recognize, okay, I need to kind of look through the noise and the chaos and go, okay, what is the next best step? And be open to understanding and open to suggestions. Sometimes people just throw up their hands and say, no, you're the boss, you figure it out. And you go, oh, okay, thanks. But you rely on your experience, advisors and whatnot to be able to make the best decision that you can at the time that whatever situation you're facing is happening. And I love what you said, being open for suggestions as a leader. And this takes some, taking your ego and kind of putting it on the back shelf, which is difficult for us humans because ego tends to jump up and say, I'm the best in this and that. Ultimately, you have to come to grips with there are things you don't know. There are things that you aren't seeing. And, I think of Roger Nierenberg, somebody that I interviewed on my show a while ago, former conductor, and he's a leadership consultant now. So he brings in uh, small orchestras into teams, and he basically has the orchestra play music for the team. But he has, the team or the organization he's training, sit with the orchestra in a makeshift orchestra pit. And then once they start playing the music and getting in sync and harmonizing everything, then he starts bringing people up to the podium where he's standing and he has them play the music, and everybody's just absolutely amazed on how different it sounds. And it's just, from, a distance type of thing, but it's a great leadership analogy because as a leader, you're going to see things that your team may not see, but your team is going to see things that you aren't going to see. So you need to have that transparent, open communication as much as possible so your team can help you do the things you need to do as a leader, and you lead them and empower them to be their own leaders. And that's one of the traits that I completely borrowed from previous leaders that I've been under for my career, and those that I in the organizations that I really thrived in was situations where they let me be my own leader. They were there to
Mhm.
support, they were able to coach me, basically guide me in directions, and and give me hints like you might want to rethink that. And which was well, let's go back to the drawing board and kind of look and see. And sometimes I just wouldn't see where I'm missing. And then they'd say, right there. And they look and they'd say a couple things. And it was this enlightening moment, like the seas opened up, the sky cleared, and you're like, oh, yeah, how'd I miss that? And it was humbling, but then it realized, okay, well, and I do this all the time, even in the work that I do, internally. Like, okay, what am I missing here? Am I missing something? Not that I'm, afraid or scared or I'm gonna screw something up. It's like, okay, is there anything that I'm missing here? And approach it from a curiosity standpoint and not okay, don't screw this up. I'm not, what am I missing? And I find that approach is really helpful for me and for the leaders and teams that I've worked with. It's like, introduce some curiosity, similar to what we talked about earlier about, the nature walk. Just, kind of be in awe and wonder and approach things sometimes as that 3-year-old that's asking questions 24/7. Why is this? What's this? What's this? What's this do? Somehow I wish we would never lose that skill. But unfortunately, so many of us have kind of parked it in the back and we don't use it as much as we should.
I love that you're mentioning this because our spirituality is often a direct connection to our sense of wonder. That's another thing that we measure, by the way, in our tool and when we're working with leaders. And that wonder is what I think is so empowering and powerful about wonder is that as much as we want to be centered and centered and self-regulated and all of that, as you and I talked about before, have this internal sense of balance. Wonder is purposefully decentering. So it helps us see that we are not the center of the universe. We are not the center of a problem. We're not the center, even though our lives can feel like it for all of us as human beings. When we're dealing with challenges in our lives, it feels like we are the center of things. But when we have a sense of wonder, when we seek perspectives that are different than our own, when we bring curiosity to situations, when we ask for others' points of view, when we really take a perspective that is this large and wide, we see that we're really not the center of things. We're actually a node in a connection, in a big complex system, and that to sort things out, we need other people. And as a leader, our job becomes exactly what your leader did. It sounded like you had a fantastic one. It becomes more about coaching, facilitating the wisdom from other people, connecting people. It becomes much more the role of a facilitator of human thinking, of human innovation, of human development in order to achieve the results that we're trying to achieve. So that's a very different role. And it is that kind of role is very much built on that sense of wonder that you're describing.
I'm very thankful. And if I ever reach out to that leader again, which I probably should, because I talk about him a bit, because I worked with him over a quarter century ago, around the time you launched your business. So just I'd ask him one question. Is like, okay, where did you learn that leadership style? What,
Mhm.
because I would really be curious about that, what his experiences were like, because he was young then. I don't think he was much older than me at that point, but he had some impeccable leadership skills for somebody of that age. So it was something that he took to heart. And yeah, one of my favorite bosses I've ever had, and I completely borrowed so much from him as far as my leadership style when I was leading companies, and just create an environment for people to thrive. And when you do that, your organization is going to thrive. You just put the pieces in place, help people be successful, give them everything they need to be successful, and let them create and be in awe and wonder of some of the things they come up with. And it's great to do that when you want to turn around teams or if you want to reinvigorate teams. It's there's so many ways to approach it. And time again, we can easily look at the companies that were able to not only survive but thrive over these last 5 years. And I'm gonna think you're gonna see a lot of common ingredients, and I think spirituality is gonna be a key component to it.
To kind of close that loop, there's nothing better, at least for me personally, when someone comes back years later. We don't know often when we're leading and we are doing the best we can to really support other people. We often don't know what impact that's actually having. I would really encourage you to find this person and to go back and just let him know. This is the ripple effect. It's actually shaped kind of who you are, how you lead, and then what you're talking about in your podcast, like what you're amplifying forward, because that probably would make a big difference to him. I think there's something about closing that loop back that is pretty important for us to be doing for each other.
I totally agree, and thank you for that prompt, and I will definitely do that. So love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and this amazing work you're doing?
That's a great question. You can find us at wisdom-works.com, and I'm on LinkedIn at Renee Moorefield. So I'm happy to answer any questions people have. And, especially, about thriving in leadership, it's so important right now that we step up our game as leaders so that we can support our organizations to do so. So I welcome the conversation.
Yeah, definitely have that in the show notes. So thank you so much again for being on the show. Really a big fan of the work that you've been doing and continue to do. So thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Michael.